Why am I surrounded by incompetence? Richard Vale's voice cracked through the boardroom like thunder. Papers fluttered. Assistants froze. 9 a.m. And the billionaire who built empires was seconds from losing one. Across the room, Amara Lewis poured coffee quietly, head lowered. The maid no one ever noticed. Outside, the German investors were already on their way up. Inside, panic reeked of power and pride. When the translator failed to arrive, Richard's fury burned through the room. Find someone! Anyone who speaks German. No one moved. Except her. What they didn't know was that the woman holding the tray understood every word, every insult, every laugh at their expense. And before the meeting was over, the same man who mocked her silence would owe her everything. This is Hidden Black Echoes, where the stories of struggles are told, the rise and the voice of those the world tried to silence. If you believe true intelligence doesn't wear a suit, hit like and subscribe, because in the next few minutes, you'll see how quiet grace outshined arrogance, and how one woman's voice turned a moment of humiliation into a lesson no billionaire could forget. Where is the translator? Richard Vale's voice cracked through the glass-walled boardroom like a gunshot. Papers fluttered. Assistants froze. Somewhere in the corner, the digital clock ticked past 9 a.m. The exact moment the German investors were stepping out of their limousine downstairs. He slammed his palm on the table, scattering folders. I pay people to anticipate problems, not create them. No one answered. The air conditioning hummed loud enough to fill the silence. Across the room, Amara Lewis bent slightly as she set a tray of coffee cups onto the side counter. She moved quietly, head down, eyes lowered, invisible as always. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline gleamed with steel and wealth. Inside, panic pressed against the walls. Richard paced the length of the table, tie loosened, breath sharp. She missed the flight? You're telling me my official interpreter is sitting in Frankfurt while I'm about to lose $1 billion deal? His assistant, Nina, stumbled through her words. We're trying to reach a replacement, sir. There's one downtown, but... But what? She's booked with the mayor's office until noon. Richard's laugh was short and humorless. Perfect. The mayor can have her. Meanwhile, I'll mime my way through international negotiations. Outside, footsteps approached. The double doors opened, and two men in tailored suits entered, Mr. Stein and Dr. Weber, representatives of one of Europe's largest automotive conglomerates. They were punctual, precise, and, as everyone soon discovered, impatient. Guten Morgen, Stein said crisply, offering a hand. Ah, yes, good morning, Richard replied, the words stumbling out. Bitte, seat. Nina winced. Amara, from her corner, felt the smallest twitch at the edge of her lips, but kept her face neutral. The Germans exchanged quick glances, polite but uneasy. They spoke to each other in low German, their tone carrying the weight of amusement and skepticism. Richard tried again, waving toward the chairs. Coffee? Ja? We talk business soon. Stein nodded stiffly. Weber murmured something under his breath, something that made both men smirk. Amara understood every word. He sounds like a tourist ordering bread. She kept her eyes on the tray, knuckles whitening around the handle. Richard launched into his opening pitch, reading from notes. His accent twisted the few German phrases he attempted into near parody. Each mistake drew another concealed smile from the investors. Nina tried to help, whispering cues, but it only made things worse. Within minutes, sentences tangled, technical terms misfired. What was meant to sound like a confident expansion strategy now resembled a confused riddle. The Germans exchanged quiet comments again, still in their language, still assuming no one could understand. "He doesn't even know what he's signing," one said. "Arrogant Americans. They think money replaces respect." Richard's forehead glistened. He forced a laugh. "Ha! Ja, sehr gut, it wasn't." Panic began to bloom behind his eyes, that rare, naked kind that no amount of money could disguise. He looked at Nina. "Smile," he hissed. "Maybe they'll think we're negotiating." Nina smiled. The Germans didn't. When the presentation finally collapsed into silence, Dr. Weber leaned back, muttered something in German too quickly for anyone else, except Amara, to follow. "Let's finish this meal of fools and leave." Richard blinked. "What did he say?" Nina shrugged. "No idea, sir." Amara's fingers tightened around the coffee pot. Weber stood, adjusting his cufflinks. "We appreciate your time, Herr Vale, but without proper translation, this meeting cannot continue." Richard's face turned crimson. "Wait! We can still—" They were already gathering their documents. Desperation cracked his voice. "Sit down! We're not done here." For a moment, the mask of power slipped. The mighty billionaire, ruler of glass towers and stock prices, looked small, cornered by his own arrogance. The Germans turned toward the door. The deal, and the empire tied to it, were seconds from vanishing. And then it happened. Amara, balancing the silver tray, reached to clear a cup near Weber. The man muttered something dismissive under his breath in German. Another insult, casual and cutting. She spoke before she could stop herself. "Vielleicht sollten Sie ihn nicht unterschätzen, Herr Weber." "Perhaps you shouldn't underestimate him, Mr. Weber." The words hung in the air like a dropped match in dry grass. The room froze. Stein's eyes widened. Weber's hand paused mid-motion. Richard straightened slowly, confusion crossing his face. "What did you just say?" Amara blinked once, realizing the silence had turned toward her. The tray trembled slightly in her hands, but her voice stayed steady. "I said, perhaps you shouldn't underestimate him, sir." Weber spoke in cautious English now. "You speak German?" Amara met his gaze evenly. "Fluent, among others." Richard stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Among others?" She nodded once. "5, sir." No one moved. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Outside the glass walls, the city kept moving, unaware that inside this tower, a maid had just rewritten the balance of power. For a full heartbeat, no one spoke. The sound of the city drifted faintly through the glass. Car horns, wind, a siren far below. But inside the room, everything stood still. Richard Vale blinked hard, trying to catch up to what had just happened. You understand German?" he managed. Amara straightened slowly, setting the tray on the table with careful grace. "Yes, sir." Stein exchanged a wary look with Weber. His curiosity overrode politeness. "Wie gut sprechen Sie?" "How well do you speak it?" Amara's reply came crisp, effortless, fließend. "Ich habe in Berlin studiert, fluent. I studied in Berlin." The words rolled out with perfect rhythm, no hesitation, no accent. Weber's brows rose. "Berlin?" "Yes," she said, shifting to English so Richard could follow. "Freie Universität. I finished my exchange there before taking work here." It landed like a soft explosion. Richard's expression twitched between shock and disbelief. "You studied abroad?" Amara nodded. languages, and cultural negotiation. The investors looked at each other again. For the first time that morning, their smiles weren't mocking. They were impressed. Richard's voice stumbled back to authority. "Fine. You sit down. Translate." Amara hesitated, glancing at the untouched coffee. "Sir, That's an order." She exhaled once, quietly, and took the empty chair beside him. The power dynamic in the room shifted so fast, even the air felt different. Stein reopened his folder, switching into German so quickly it sounded like rainfall. The words were dense: percentages, acquisition clauses, manufacturing timelines. Richard's pen froze mid-note. What did he say? Amara's voice flowed smoothly. He's proposing a 12-month transition period with partial equity protection. He'd like assurance that the Munich plant remains under their branding. Richard nodded too quickly. Yes, tell him that's fine. Amara turned back to Stein, replying in calm, confident German. She didn't just translate. She reshaped Richard's rushed words into tactful diplomacy. Her phrasing carried nuance, respect, humility, partnership. Stein's face softened. He responded warmly. Weber tested her next, slipping into Bavarian dialect, a fast, clipped variation meant to trip her. Amara didn't flinch. She answered in the same dialect, mirroring his rhythm perfectly. Nina, the assistant, stood frozen near the door, eyes wide. She'd never heard Amara speak this way, measured, commanding, alive. The meeting picked up pace. What had started as chaos now moved like a well-tuned orchestra. Every sentence passed through Amara's calm voice, smoothed, clarified, strengthened. When Richard stumbled over financial terms, she rescued him with polished precision. When the investors grew cautious, she softened their edges with a phrase that blended language and empathy. Soon they weren't looking at Richard anymore. They were looking at her. And she noticed. But she kept her tone even, modest. After an hour, the tension had melted into conversation. Laughter, genuine this time, broke the stiffness. Stein leaned back, smiling. Ihre Assistentin ist sehr talentiert. Your assistant is very talented. Amara began to correct him, but Richard spoke first, puffing his chest. Ah, yes, very talented indeed. He didn't notice the flicker in her eyes. He was too busy reclaiming the illusion of control. When the meeting finally paused for coffee, Weber turned to her. You must have a background in diplomacy, Frau Lewis. Amara smiled faintly. Just in listening. The room chuckled. Only Nina caught the depth behind the line. As the break ended, Stein stood and extended his hand to Richard. Herr Vale, this has been productive. We believe our companies can work together after all. Richard grinned, relief flooding his face. Excellent. Yes, very excellent. Weber added something quietly in German as he shook Amara's hand. She answered just as quietly. Danke, Herr Weber. Manchmal braucht es kein Titel, gehört zu werden. Sometimes it doesn't take a title to be heard. He smiled, understanding perfectly. If you're still watching, you felt that heavy shift. Tap like and subscribe if you believe power means nothing. When wisdom finally speaks. When the Germans left, the heavy doors shut behind them with a soft click. Silence returned. This time calm, not tense. Richard exhaled loudly, collapsing into his chair. Well, that could have gone worse. Nina nodded. Could have gone much worse. Amara stood, smoothing her apron, ready to collect the empty cups. But Richard's voice stopped her. Wait. She froze. He looked up at her, eyes still searching. How many languages did you say? 5, she said simply. He let out a low whistle. And you're cleaning floors in my house. Her expression stayed composed. Work is work, sir. Understanding people, that's what matters. Richard said nothing. For the first time that day, humility crept into the room. Amara gathered the cups, quiet as always, but the silence around her was different now. Charged with respect, not dismissal. When she reached the door, Nina whispered under her breath, "You just saved him." Amara glanced back, her eyes calm. He'll never admit it. Then she left, leaving behind a room full of polished glass and the faint echo of a truth no money could buy. The building had finally gone quiet. The guests were gone, the conference room cleared, the tension drained from the walls. Richard Vale stood at the tall window overlooking the city, jacket undone, his reflection looking older than he remembered. The papers on the table were still scattered from earlier. The aftermath of panic turned miracle. Behind him, Amara gathered the last of the coffee cups, moving as silently as ever. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "You saved that deal." Amara paused. "I did my job, sir." "That wasn't your job," he said, still facing the glass. "Your job was to serve coffee, not save a $1 billion contract." Amara set the tray down gently. Sometimes life doesn't care about job titles. That made him turn. The look in his eyes wasn't anger anymore. It was curiosity, almost disbelief. "How long have you been able to do that?" "Since before I worked here," she said simply. "You studied in Germany?" "Yes." "Why the hell are you scrubbing floors in my house?" Her expression didn't change. "Because people like me don't always get to start where they belong." He frowned, not understanding. "You could have gone anywhere." "Why here?" Amara met his gaze. "Because this is where I learned the truth about power. It's not in titles or money. It's in what you know and what you don't show." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, honest. Richard moved to the table, fingers brushing across the folder Stein had left behind. "You could have embarrassed me in front of them. Instead, you made me look competent." "I wasn't protecting your ego," she said softly. "I was protecting the work. You built something important. It deserved respect, even if you didn't give it to everyone around you." Her words hit harder than any boardroom insult. He studied her face, calm, composed, unreadable. The same woman he'd walked past 100 times without really seeing. Finally, he asked, "How many languages did you say?" 5. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "And I can barely manage one." Amara smiled faintly. "Most people only learn the language that serves them. I learned the ones that connect people." He looked at her again, longer this time. "You realize those men thought you were an assistant and treated you with more respect in 10 minutes than I did in a year." Amara said nothing. Her silence said enough. Richard sighed. "You could run circles around half my executives." "I'm not trying to run around anyone," she said. "I just want to use what I know." That line lingered. Something in him shifted, pride bending toward humility. "You're wasted as staff," he murmured. "I'm not wasted," Amara replied. "Every room teaches you something, even this one." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. "Amara." She looked back. He hesitated, words catching in his throat, something between apology and gratitude fighting to get out. "Thank you." Amara nodded once. "You're welcome, sir." When she was gone, Richard stood alone in the echo of her calm. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire who thought he knew everything realized he'd never really learned how to listen. 3 days later, the headquarters looked entirely different. The boardroom that had once been a cage of panic was now dressed for triumph. Polished glass, fresh flowers, and a long table lined with investors, executives, and cameras. The merger signing ceremony was minutes away. Reporters gathered at the far end of the room, murmuring about the historic partnership between Vale Automotive and Weber Industries. Richard Vale adjusted his cufflinks in the reflection of the glass. He looked composed, powerful again. But beneath the calm, something had changed. Across the room, Amara stood by the catering table, arranging cups. Same uniform, same composure. No one outside that inner circle knew the truth, that the woman serving coffee was the reason this deal even existed. Nina, the assistant, walked over, lowering her voice. "He's going to announce it." Amara looked up. "Announce what?" Nina smiled faintly. "You'll see." The doors opened. The German delegates entered first, all smiles and politeness now. Mr. Stein spotted Amara immediately and offered a respectful nod. Dr. Weber followed suit, murmuring a quiet, "Guten Morgen, Frau Lewis," as he passed. She returned the greeting, flawless and natural. Several executives turned, surprised to hear her speak their language so effortlessly. Richard took the podium. Cameras clicked. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today marks the start of a global partnership, one built on innovation, collaboration, and trust." He spoke confidently, but this time there was something softer in his voice. "When this deal nearly fell apart, someone in this room reminded me what leadership actually means. Not power, not pride, but listening." The crowd shifted, curious. Richard gestured toward Amara. "I'd like to thank someone who doesn't usually stand in this spotlight, Miss Amara Lewis." A ripple went through the room. Heads turned. Amara froze for half a second, unsure if she'd heard right. Richard continued. "When our translator failed to arrive, Amara stepped in. She didn't just translate words. She translated understanding. She bridged worlds when I couldn't even bridge sentences." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing louder. The German investors joined in, smiling warmly. Amara's cheeks flushed. She bowed her head slightly, unsure what to do with the sudden attention. Richard went on. "It reminded me that brilliance doesn't wear a suit. It can wear an apron and still outshine the rest of us." The line landed like a truth the entire room needed to hear. He turned to her directly. "Thank you, Amara, for saving this company from my own arrogance." The applause swelled again. Even the reporters clapped. Amara stepped forward slowly, meeting his gaze. "You're welcome, sir," she said softly. Richard extended his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. Firm, professional, equal. For the first time, it wasn't a billionaire and a maid. It was two people who understood what real power looked like. Not dominance, but respect. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed. Cameras clicked, executives congratulated, glasses clinked. Amara slipped away quietly, stepping into the hallway. She leaned against the wall, breathing in the quiet. For once the silence didn't feel heavy. Behind her, Nina appeared. "He's going to offer you something." Amara smiled faintly. "He already did." "What's that?" "The one thing money can't buy," she said. "Acknowledgment." She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had scrubbed floors and served coffee. now recognized for what they truly were: capable, worthy, seen. And somewhere inside that glass tower, the sound of applause still echoed, not for wealth, but for wisdom that had finally spoken loud enough to be heard. A week later, the rain fell gently over the city, the kind that washed everything clean without noise or thunder. Inside Vale Automotive Headquarters, the building hummed with a different kind of energy. The merger had gone public. The stock had risen overnight. The media hailed it as a flawless diplomatic success. Richard Vale sat behind his desk, staring at a single envelope resting on the polished surface. Across from him stood Amara Lewis, no longer in her Maid uniform. Today she wore a modest navy blouse and a calm, unshakable expression. He leaned back in his chair. "Do you know how many calls I've had from the board this week?" Amara stayed silent. "They all want to meet the woman who saved their reputation." He gave a small, rueful smile. "I told them you weren't interested in fame, that you preferred quiet rooms and clear purpose." Her lips curved slightly. "You weren't wrong." He slid the envelope toward her. "That's your new contract." Amara hesitated. "My Director of Cultural Relations," he said, "officially part of the executive team. I want you leading every cross-border negotiation we have. No one should ever be ignored in this building again." She blinked once, caught off guard. "Sir, I don't—" Richard shook his head. "You earned it. Don't talk yourself out of what you already deserve." The words landed softly but deeply, a rare humility from a man built on control. Amara took the envelope, her fingers brushing the heavy paper. "Thank you," she said quietly. Richard smiled. "No, Amara. Thank you. You reminded me what leadership actually looks like." She met his eyes. "Listening?" He nodded. "Exactly." Later that evening, Amara walked alone down the marble hallway toward the elevator. The building looked different now. Not brighter, just clearer. People she passed greeted her with polite smiles, respectful nods. No one looked through her anymore. As she reached the elevator, she noticed her old cleaning cart still parked near the maintenance closet. The handle gleamed under the soft fluorescent light. Amara paused. For a moment, memories flashed. Spilled coffee, early mornings, quiet tears behind closed doors. Then she reached out, unclipped the name tag still hanging from the side. S-T-A-F-F. She turned it over in her palm, smiling softly before slipping it into her pocket. The elevator doors opened with a gentle chime. As she stepped inside, she whispered to herself, "Some voices don't need volume, just the right moment to be heard." The doors closed. And for the first time, Amara Lewis rode to the top floor, not as a servant, but as someone who'd finally been seen. If stories like this remind you that dignity doesn't wear designer suits, hit like and subscribe, so you never miss the next story, where quiet strength turns arrogance into respect, and power finally learns to listen.